Hi, and welcome to the video. Now in genealogy, many of us run into brick walls during our research. And it can take weeks, months, even years to resolve it. In some cases, brick walls are never resolved at all. And now, while brick walls can be caused by a lack of records or a lack of evidence or conflicting records, some cases brick walls are caused by inconsistent or incorrect research methods. So in this video, I want to walk through a research path that I took for one of my relatives, John Smith, and to highlight some of the things you can do to avoid brick walls. And there's about 12 of them. And I hope you can catch them as we go through the video. Now at the end of the video, I'll go through all 12 so we see what we spotted. So in any case, this research is really compressed. It's John Smith, and let's go and see how I researched John Smith. Now let's start with this marriage certificate of my great-great-grandparents who were married on November the 5th, 1863. My research goal here is to identify the parents of Elizabeth Smith. Now we can see from the certificate their father is John Smith. Now to make it interesting, there were over 20,000 John Smiths in England at this time. The first step to avoiding a brick wall is to actually have a research plan to go with your goal. In this video, I'll focus on the things that can trip you up along the way rather than going through this planning strategy in detail. So step one will be to define a research goal, identify the parents of Elizabeth Smith. And step two, I'm just going to look at the 1841 and 1851 census to give you some idea of how we research and bring things together. Now, obviously a lot more research went into identifying the family than just looking at two census records, but I want to use this as an example. So here we are at the 1841 census, and let's zoom into our Smith family. And here we have John Smith, Elizabeth Smith, Mary Proctor, Margaret Smith, Elizabeth Smith, the daughter of 3 months old, and John Smith is a journeyman shoemaker. The J means journeyman here. Now, we always need to look at records in detail because there's a lot of interesting information here that we'll use later on. Number one is the residence, which in this case, the 1841 census is at the top of the page. And to the right far column, that S tells me that John Smith was born in Scotland. We also need to understand the records we're looking at. And we can see here the ages appear to be 25 for both John and Elizabeth. But for this census, and this census only in fact, all ages of adults were rounded down to the nearest 25. So John Smith and Elizabeth could be any age from 25 to 29. And let's look at the transcription. We see the transcription here in Ancestry is incorrect. And that's no surprise, a lot of transcriptions are incorrect. We have the incorrect first names for Elizabeth. And Mary Proctor is transcribed as Mary Procher. So a search record, unless I was using wildcards, may not even find Mary. So again, a rule here is do your own transcription. Do not rely, if you can, on any third-party transcription. Many of them are incorrect. But let's go and look at the 1851 census. Here we are at the 1851 census. Again, slightly different format to the 1841. But let's zoom into our Smith family. And here we have Elizabeth Smith, Edward Smith, Margaret Smith, Elizabeth, Bridget, and Isabella. And we can see from this that obviously 3 children are new since the 1841 census, and Elizabeth Smith is a widow. Now, based on these 2 census and other information, I can start putting the Smith family together. And beyond census information, this is what I have. I have John Smith, who died apparently before the 1851 census. From the 1851 census, I can see Elizabeth Smith was born about 1818, and I have 5 children. Margaret born 1838, Elizabeth born 1841, Bridget born 1846, Edward 47, and Isabella 49. Now looking at this as a family historian, I'm also suspicious that there were some children in the gap between Elizabeth and Bridget, but these are not readily apparent. But now I have a family, I need to know Elizabeth's maiden name, so I need to look for some kind of marriage record for John Smith and Elizabeth so I can take this research forward. After extensive searching in several systems and looking at local archives, we found only one marriage that fits our couple, the marriage between John Smith and Elizabeth Greenhow on the 14th of January 1837. So everything seems to fit. It fits the place, the names and the time. And most documented family trees have assumed that this record is incorrect. I get hints all the time in Ancestry and looking at Family Search that this in fact is the marriage between John Smith and Elizabeth Greenhow. And we can see that this already is put as facts in many people's trees. Here they are recorded as facts in the trees that I looked at earlier. But obviously we'd never use information from somebody else's tree without fully validating and verifying the information. And also, this is just one record. This doesn't prove anything at all. And when I look at the marriage in more detail, I use maps to visualize where the marriage took place. And the marriage is taking place in the middle of winter, 14th of January 1837, 25 miles away in a very inhospitable part of northwest England. People would have to walk or ride horses across mountains here. So although it doesn't stop this marriage from being the correct marriage, it doesn't give me enough information to use it. So again, another rule is a record on its own does not prove anything. You need supporting information even to prove a vital record or something like that, even when you try and tie things together. So this is a red flag, and I'll set this record aside and start looking at the children to see if I can get some more information. Now I've found the marriage certificate for Margaret, Elizabeth's sister, and immediately something strikes me as not unusual but interesting. Margaret Smith has the same witnesses as Elizabeth's marriage. So I have the same information. I have John Smith, the shoemaker, Strickland Gate. I looked at my maps, it's very close to Highgate. That all makes sense. But let's move outside the immediate family and go into what we call a fan network of friends, associates and neighbours to see who this Thomas Capstick and Mary Ann Capstick are, to see if there's any relationship between them and the family. So why do these witnesses keep cropping up? I found Thomas Capstick and Mary Agnes's marriage, and there's some surprising information there. That name Mary Proctor I've seen before, and a bookbinder in Highgate I've seen before. And I also have Margaret Smith witnessing their marriage. So let's see where I saw them before. This is information that I saw on the 1841 and 1851 census. In the home of John Smith, we had Mary Proctor, and Elizabeth Smith was a bookbinder in Highgate. Now this still does not prove anything, but it gives me information that I should follow this fan network even further and look for the baptism of Mary Ann Proctor to see what I can come up with. And this is an image of Mary Agnes's baptism. Her mother is Elizabeth Proctor, who is unmarried, and there is no father, just as we saw in her marriage certificate. This is a clue, but still not conclusive. Another note, there's a transcription error. The baptism occurred in 1837, not 1836. And that's almost the same week as we saw the marriage record of Elizabeth Smith, now Greenhow, marrying John Smith. So I'll have to keep looking at John and Elizabeth's children. And here I found a single birth record of one of the children. No other baptism records, no other birth records, but finally for the youngest daughter, I found a birth certificate for Isabella. And let me zoom into that. And I can see the father, in fact, is John Rooney Smith. That middle name is so useful. And I see Elizabeth Smith, formerly Proctor. And John's work there is cordwainer, which is an old English for a skilled shoemaker who crafts new shoes, rather than just a shoe repairer, rather than just a cobbler. So I think this information now is becoming conclusive. We're starting to pull together information. Let me see if I can find any records of John Rooney Smith now. Now I have a middle name. And in fact, I did find a death certificate for John Rooney Smith, a cordwainer, aged 33, who died in 1849. So now that agrees with the census information. So now I can start bringing together some facts that I can bring together a hypothesis from. We had Mary Proctor in the house of John Elizabeth Smith in 1841. We have Mary Agnes Proctor baptized to Elizabeth Proctor, an unmarried mother, in 1837. We have Elizabeth Smith as a widow in 1851. We have John Smith's death in 1849. We have Mary Agnes marrying Thomas Capstick, and Mary Agnes and Thomas Capstick witnessed the marriages of Elizabeth and Margaret. Margaret Smith also witnessed Mary Agnes and Thomas's marriage herself. And then finally, to bring it all together, we have Elizabeth Smith's mother's maiden name, Elizabeth Proctor, on a birth certificate. So we can now have a hypothesis testing. The hypothesis would be that Elizabeth Smith's parents, and subsequently my great-great-great-grandparents, are John Rooney Smith and Elizabeth Proctor. Now I need to document this and fairly test this hypothesis. But as you can see, we moved through this investigation and tried to avoid brick walls on the way. So now we have an hypothesis for John Rooney Smith and his wife Elizabeth Proctor. And we can see how we got there. And did you notice the things that I did that were maybe not direct research? So let's go through the 12 things that I hope you picked up. I had a research plan. I validated known facts as part of that research plan before I started researching further sources. I looked at the actual images if they were available. I examined those images in detail to see what else I could find. I understood the source information that I was working from and any different details that would give me. I did my own transcriptions. I wasn't swayed by missing records or just a single record. I used maps to visualize events in a wider structure. I certainly didn't copy other people's work or even take their hints unless I fully validated or verified their information. What I did do is I used the fan network, friends, associates and neighbours, to branch out from my family, the couple I was looking at, beyond their children, to bring some things together. So I focused on the whole family, not just direct descendants. And then finally, one thing I didn't do as part of the video, but you must do, is now I must go now and test my hypothesis and document my findings. Because actually when you document things and give citations to records, it will make you ensure that the information you're giving is correct and there's no conflicting information you want to work with. So I hope you found this video informative and you've enjoyed the search for John and Elizabeth Smith. If you do, please like and subscribe to this channel and watch out for future videos. Have a great day.